I call Carmel Sepaloni, 5 minutes.
Mr Speaker, I haven't been on the Health Select Committee, but I have heard my colleague, the Honourable Annette King, speaking at much length about this bill, and she has given us some fairly robust discussion with regards to this, has made us very aware of what she, being on the Select Committee, supports and what she doesn't support. And I guess I'll just start with saying that it is great to see that the National Government are finally acting on something that the previous Labor government started 8 years later, in fact, because it was Pete Hodgson who 8 years ago actually introduced a public health bill in relation to this. So, Mr Speaker, I'm glad that we finally got to this point. So we know the bill will increase the range of infectious diseases that are notifiable to Medical Officer of Health without identifying information or patient or diseased persons. This will include HIV infection, gonorrhea infection, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome and syphilis, Mr Speaker. Concerns that the current legislation does not fully support public health practice have been articulated by staff and health agencies over a sustained period of time, which is why this bill is necessary and long overdue. 3 measures are being introduced: contract tracing, an increase in the range of diseases that are notifiable, and options for the management of individuals with significant infectious diseases whose behaviour puts people at the risk of contracting a disease. But the restrictions around sunbed, Mr Speaker, as our colleague from the Green Party, Jan Logie, has said, do not go far enough. We should be banning sunbeds, Mr Speaker, like they have in Australia. Coleman has taken a limp-wristed approach, Mr Speaker, to restrictions on sunbeds. He is now getting the ministry to consult on further restrictions on sunbeds. Why is he doing this when the legislation is being passed through now in the House? It's because he knows the restrictions don't go far enough, and he is on the wrong side of the public health debate in relation to this issue. The Ministry of Health has said that banning sunbeds fails one of their key objectives for public health intervention, that, quote, it would prevent access to sunbed services by adults who are well informed and choose to take the risk of UV tanning for cosmetic purposes, end quote. So a key test of public health intervention under this government is the right of people to increase their risk of getting melanoma by 75% for cosmetic reasons. It does seem irresponsible, Mr Speaker, and if we look at other public health debates, for instance around tobacco, then there seems to be a bit of a contradiction here. We're not saying with tobacco, we'll leave it as is because it's your right to choose. In that instance, we're saying actually we must increase taxes. In that instance, we are saying we will do everything we can to try and make smoking less of an attractive option to people because it is such a big public health issue. And so here, Mr Speaker, we had an opportunity to ban sunbeds because it is such a public health issue, but instead the government is saying, well, actually, as long as adults are well informed and if they choose to take the risk, then it's up to them. And so I think we've got a bit of a contradiction around public health messages being put out by that government, Mr Speaker. The Ministry of Health, Coleman's department said, has been concerned for some time about the use of sunbeds in New Zealand, given the clear evidence that they pose significant risk of increased skin cancers to users. The government should have voted for the Honourable Annette King's supplementary order paper, which would have restricted sunbeds for medical purposes only for persons of all ages. How difficult would that be? We are talking about public health issues here. We're talking about something that we know increases the risk of melanoma by 75%, Mr Speaker, and that supplementary order paper that was put up by the Honourable Annette King was a sensible supplementary order paper. So it just seems nonsensical that the government wouldn't support that. Mr Speaker, we are supporting this bill, but I guess, I could go on, but I won't. Our major issue here is that the government have not done enough with respect to the sunbed issue. Australia has been much more responsible in this regard. They are banning them, and unfortunately, we are probably going to be on the receiving end of all those old sunbeds that Australians are no longer allowed to use. So, very unfortunate, Mr Speaker, and I think with regards to that aspect of this bill, the government should be quite embarrassed.
I call Dr.